Right. Oh, this meeting's been live streamed. Thank you, Bav. We're into it already. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's been our most popular webinar for this season so far. And I'll be completely honest with you, we had no idea that it was going to be so popular when we decided to do it. It was really a test. So typically what we do with these expert lock-ins is we bring one of our partners on board and they tell you about why they're so fantastic and the benefits that you get as an LNPG member. But with Ambion, we've not actually had that conversation yet. It's planned in for tomorrow. We decided to bring these guys on tonight because we wanted really to see, Paul's in here. We wanted to see more than anything what the membership thought of the concept more than anything, because infrared heating is, well, it's brand new, isn't it? I don't know whether how long you guys have been knocking around for, Warren, Oliver.
Infrared is actually well established. I would call it novel in the UK.
Ah, right. So
the UK market's a funny one. And in the UK, 85% of homes are on gas. There's been like a big push of government policy over a generation now to convert away from what we used to do, which used to be coal and all sorts of things, onto gas. So we have a huge kind of installed base on gas. Anything else is pretty tiny at this stage. But as you're probably aware, with the net zero targets for 2050, government policy is warming up to ban gas. And so it's like a flurry of new technologies. So that's why infrared feels new, but on the continent it's really well established.
Well, it feels new to me, at least, Oliver, but I'm a very ignorant person. So, but, you know, having said that of myself, I'd also spoken this week to 3 national distributors about what conversations have they had about infrared. And all 3 of them came back and said, not something that they'd heard of it before, but it's not something that's being discussed seriously. So tonight we're going to find out exactly what it's all about. You'll have received, everyone, a pop-up when you joined that said this meeting's being recorded. It's also being live streamed on our Facebook group as well. So if you're uncomfortable with being recorded or live streamed, feel free to anonymize yourself, turn off your camera, change your name, mute yourself, or leave the meeting and join us on Facebook, on our Facebook group. So tonight, without further ado, as you'll have seen already, we've got Warren Knowles and Oliver Baker of Ambion Heating. Oliver Baker is the CEO. We've got the big cheese with us, and Warren Knowles is the BDM, who's the talker that we've had a few meetings with in the past. I'm really anxious to just get into this, I think, guys, because as you'll have seen, we've got 54 people in the room right now. I think everyone is probably here to find out what on earth they can do about their heating systems going forward, particularly in the face of the EPC restrictions or tightening of EPC that's just over the horizon now. So I'm hoping you can help us with this. Should we get started?
Right. Well, Warren's going to kick off and then I'm going to pick up in a little bit. So over to you, Warren.
Thank you. So, I'm Warren Knowles, Business Development Manager for Ambion. Thank you, Anthony, for that impressive build-up. Hope we can fulfill what you're thinking, but and then hand you over to the clever brains, which is Oliver, and we'll go from there. So what's driving the change? The EPC rules are being tightened from 2025. Gas boilers are being phased out 2025 to 2035. It's widely agreed that the future of home heating is electric, so landlords are busy upgrading their properties in a future-proof way. This often means moving to electric heating. The scenarios we see as being important to us and you guys are, if you're moving from a conventional electric product, like a panel or a storage heater, to a new high energy performance product, or if you're moving from gas to electric, to be future-proof. 15% of landlords surveyed, we believe, have no knowledge of the upcoming changes to the EPC rules. So properties risk of being unrentable if landlords do not make necessary changes. More than a third of landlords say their rentals were built pre-1940. Excuse me. 4 in 10 landlords say their London properties were built pre-1940. Similarly, I can't say that, similarly, in Southwest Scotland and Wales, and 1 in 7 landlords surveyed have no knowledge of the upcoming legislative changes to the Energy Performance Certificate. That's according to new research from Shawbrook Bank. From 2025, all new rented properties will be required to have an EPC rating of C or above. Currently, properties only require an EPC rating of E or above. Existing tenancies will have until 2028 to comply with this new rule change. So you've got 3 years, or if you've got people living there, maximum of 5 years. Ambion has data and case studies that illustrate insulating the fabric of the building and using our panels can take an EPC E rating to an EPC C rating, as well as reduce the overall heating cost to the tenant. From 2025, there's going to be no gas or oil boilers to be installed in new build. That's according to Future Home Standard from December 2021. And from 2035, all new heating appliances installed in the UK homes and workplaces will be low carbon. That's a net zero strategy, which is Build Back Greener from October 2021. Finally, Ambion at a glance, we're based in West Yorkshire. We've got teams to manage every aspect of your project, from design consultation through to installation and aftercare. That's including everything in between. We cover the entire UK. We're a British technology company developing pioneering heating solutions to help the UK transition to a low carbon future. We're on a mission to make home heating cheaper, greener and healthier. We've now developed a suite of intelligent heating solutions installed over 1,000 homes in the UK.
Thanks, Warren.
I'll move over
Yeah,
to you.
so what we're about is we think we have the best low carbon heating system for smaller homes and multi-occupancy buildings. In this transition away from gas to electric heating systems, and we do believe, and I really don't think we're kind of alone in this, just read the literature. All the indications are that electric is the low carbon heat source or energy source of choice. You know, our vehicles are going onto electric, heating's going electric. There are other sort of fringe activities like hydrogen, but for your average home, electricity is definitely the way forward. But the challenge we have, all of us, as we transition away from gas towards electric solutions, is that gas, in terms of kilowatt hours, is relatively cheap. I might have said super cheap a few months ago, but of course, nothing energy-wise is super cheap anymore. But it is still relatively much cheaper than the unit, a kilowatt hour of electricity. So if you take the underlying prices in this latest energy price cap, a kilowatt hour of gas is 10 pence and electricity is 34 pence. So that's a 3 times difference between the others. By the way, before this latest energy crisis and the price cap, the difference was 4 times. So if you transition from a gas system to a conventional electric system, without getting technical, you are basically putting the cost of running that system up by 3 times at a stroke. So there's an urgent need, therefore, if you're going to make this transition, for new technology electric systems, which are colloquially, you might say, more efficient than the conventional electric systems to begin to claw back that price difference. Heat pumps is such technology. That's why you're seeing so much stuff being talked about heat pumps, because they have, you can't strictly talk about efficiency, but you can talk about performance. They have a 3 times performance ratio compared to a conventional heater. It's usually referred to as an SCOP of 3. That's a seasonal coefficient of performance. But really colloquially, what that means is a heat pump has 3 times the energy performance of a conventional heater, or put another way, will provide heat requiring only 1/3 of the energy compared to a conventional heater. So that's a big step forward to clawing back that 3-to-1 difference in terms of the unit cost of energy. However, it's not a silver bullet because these things are really expensive, usually 60% above conventional systems. You know, there's nothing cheaper than replacing your gas boiler. You could do it for, you know, £2,500 maybe. To put in a heat pump system could cost you, you know, 15k. The other problem with heat pumps is that they are not suitable for a large part of the UK housing stock. There's research out there from the Energy and Utilities Alliance that says that up to 54% of the UK housing stock may be not be suitable by virtue either of their size, terraced and high-rise buildings in particular, very difficult, or indeed their poor thermal efficiency. In other words, they're old houses with not particularly insulated walls where heat pumps really struggle. By contrast, the Ambion low carbon heat panels have a very similar energy performance, 2.69 times, and we'll explain how that's achieved in a minute. So we're getting very close to a heat pump. We are half the cost of the heat pump. That's because we're a simple electric panel when all is said and done. And we are suitable for all housing stock because it's a small system. It's just a panel on a wall or a series of panels on the wall. And actually infrared works particularly well in houses with relatively poor thermal efficiency, so old traditional houses, and are far less kind of pernickety about the thermal efficiency of the building than a heat pump. So a high energy performance with low upfront costs and suitable across all house types. So introducing the panel, there's our large panel on the screen. Low upfront costs, below storage heaters, a bit more than a bog standard electric panel, but still below storage heaters. Easy to install, no central boiler, no external unit, no water-based delivery system, no space constraints, so really ideal for small house types. No maintenance, there are no moving parts in that product. Low carbon emissions and low running costs. Basically, we're using typically 60% fewer kilowatt hours than a conventional system. That's driving down your emissions. That's driving down your running costs. So these are the kind of buildings that we typically go into, from small semi-detached and terraced to accommodation blocks and tower blocks on the right-hand side. And actually the performance of the product will change by house type somewhat. So on the left-hand side, typical upfront costs at list price, 4,500 to 5,500 to put the heating system in. A flat, typically 3,500 to 4,500 for a sort of 1 or 2 bedroom flat. The performance ratio, so this is the figure that you compare alongside the SCOP of 3 for a heat pump. This idea that you get 3 out for 1 in, or you can achieve thermal comfort with 1/3 of the energy of a conventional system. Our ratio is in a small and terrace property is between 2.4 and 2.9 broadly. In flats and smaller buildings, where you get an even higher rate, 3.5 to 5 times. That 5 times actually is achieved in that block of flats on the right hand side. You can see them. That's a real block. That we all 47, I think it is, flats in that block is given over, and therefore you get a sort of lots of adjoining properties all on our product. You actually get some very, very high performance ratios, up to 5 times as put there. So crudely put, on the left hand side, you're achieving carbon and energy savings of between 59 and 65%, and on the right hand side between 70 and 80%. Our product's appropriate for retrofit, new build, and modular. How it works. So we got, just to introduce the product a bit more, you've got 2 sizes there, 820 watts and 430 watts. They're wall mounted. They're made of robust toughened glass with a metal surround. They've got an integrated microprocessor and temperature sensor on each panel. And that's a really simple visual clue that this is a very particular form of infrared heating panel. There are plenty of infrared panels out there which are just, if you like, dumb and work off a thermostat there. That's a totally different product. They will not achieve what I'm talking about here this afternoon or this evening. So that's a clue as to what the technology, where the technology sits. That little red circle there, that's pointing to the sensor, And also in that metal bar, you've got the microprocessor, and that's the key part of the product. We'll come on to that. They all connect to a control panel. So the whole system can be controlled by your customer at a single, or your resident at a single point where everything is controlled centrally. And there's no separate switching or occupancy monitoring required. Some of our infrared colleagues have gone really a different route, which is to say, let's have monitors or sensors that detect when you come in and out of the room. And as you come in, we're going to zap you. And as you go out, we're going to switch off. In other words, treating heating like lighting. That's not what we're doing. You're going to see in a minute that we're all about a pulsing technology. But that's the product. How it works. So our system completely replaces thermostats. You can see there within the inner circle, the sensor and the microprocessor embedded in the bar. Otherwise, you've got a infrared element, which is sandwiched between two sheets of glass. It's all about the control system. It's not actually about the infrared, really, it's about the control system. We use constant dynamic pulsing of electricity. So this is an always on product, literally 24 hours a day, but it is always pulsing. So what you're able to achieve with a combination of our control system and indeed infrared is constant thermal comfort, but with a very intermittent and pulsed supply of electricity. And it's the off pulses, to put it crudely, is where the energy is saved. It's a little bit like strobe lighting for those of you who are aware how that works. It's a sort of constant outcome, but with a pulsed energy supply.
What's an off pulse, Oliver?
It's when it's not pulsed on, if I can put it that way. So you get a pulse that requires energy.
So it peaks and it troughs, and it's the trough that's saving the energy rather than a flat line.
Yeah.
Yes. So if you can get a constant output of thermal comfort, but only with a pulsed on, pulsed energy supply, clearly you're saving energy in the periods when you're actually pulsed off or not on. Yeah.
Yeah. In a simple sense, it's like if you're switching a light, if it's light instead of heat, it's like a light being switched on and off. So it's off, then it's switched on. That's the pulsing.
It's an odd concept, and
yeah.
I kind of understand it theoretically, but it's completely the opposite to the best way to run a gas boiler, for instance, right? Because most of the energy is turning it on. So having something turning on and off again, it's just strange to think that that's actually the most efficient way to run this system.
It is slightly counterintuitive, but I'd just like to make a couple of things to make it clear that just going down this slide. Why this approach works with infrared and why infrared are the perfect partner is that if you leave infrared on for long enough, it will totally saturate the building materials in the room with infrared energy. And that when you switch the energy supply off, the walls, which have absorbed that energy, will release the infrared, maintaining the effect of heat. And that is not a dynamic that works with convective air. So let me just talk a little bit about infrared and convective heating. We're all very used to convective heating. So we have boilers that heat up water that slush around the house, goes through your radiator, and you get a little bit of sort of like direct radiant heat out of a radiator, but the big effect you're getting is convective air. So warm air being heated, air being heated and then circulating around the room to fill the house with, or the room with hot air. And from that, we get a feeling of thermal comfort. That is not what infrared is doing. Infrared is like sunlight. It is exactly the same physics as sunlight. It's to all intents and purposes, it is sunlight in terms of how you get warmed by the sun. However, there's no ultraviolet, so there are no health effects with this whatsoever. In fact, infrared is good for you. All the negative aspects of sunlight are with ultraviolet, and there's no ultraviolet in infrared. That's a whole different thing. So if you're out in cold air, imagine you're outside, you stand into a beam of sunlight, and immediately you feel warm. That is infrared that you're experiencing. Now, infrared is therefore being transmitted by the sun. It travels through air without warming it, which is why the outside air is not warm. When it meets matter, be it yourself or a building, that matter readily absorbs infrared It's actually exciting the molecules within the matter, including yourself, creating friction and creating an inner warmth. It's the kind of warmth you feel when you're in the Mediterranean rather than in a stuffy room in England with your central heating. It's a natural, very pleasant feeling. That is what infrared does. Now, what we are doing with it is allowing exactly that process to happen. The infrared's emitted from our heaters. It is heating you and the walls. But what we're really trying to do is get you to the situation where you are. Imagine yourself on your hot summer holiday. You're standing on the beach. A cloud goes by, covers the sun, and you immediately realize you're feeling a bit cold, and you're reminded that it's not the air that's warm so much as being in receipt of that infrared. That's one aspect. The other aspect is then that evening you go to your villa or wherever you're staying. The sun has long gone, but you're still feeling really hot or warm. That is because that building has absorbed infrared from the sun all during the day. And when the sun goes down, the walls then start emitting that infrared, releasing it and maintaining a feeling of warmth for many hours after the sun has gone. And that is the aspect of infrared that we are using. We're not trying to zap you with sunbeams. What we're trying to do is warm the house. What we are doing is warming the house just as the sun does during the day, so that even when the energy supply is cut off, you are continue to be warmed. But rather than doing it in a massive 12-hour cycle with the sun coming up, beaming down all day, and then disappearing, you having 12 hours of darkness and absorbing that energy from the walls, we're doing it by constant pulsing. And a typical pulsing routine might be 1 second on, 4 seconds off, 1 second on, 25 seconds off, 1 minute on, 15 minutes off. I mean, there are many, many different cycles. And what our software is doing, it's measuring the air temperature in the room. It's working out the minute it's departing from target temperature, and then it's redeploying an alternative pulsing routine to maintain target to within 0.1 degrees of target temperature 24 hours a day. So it's a very different approach. It's got a really solid set of results behind it because it is delivering constant thermal comfort in all rooms in the house 24 hours a day. And that is unique to our approach. The other thing to realize is that all the panels link together in a system with a central control panel. The central control panel is where the customer goes to put in all their requirements. But you do not fiddle around with the system on a daily basis. You put in your requirements, say what temperature you want, what rooms, at what time of the day. You never want to go down to zero, because then what you've done is you've lost all your stored energy, but you may want to dial it down a little bit. So the user has full control. But once they've loaded up their requirements, they then leave it alone. Do not try and game the computer. The computer's always going to beat you. What the panel also does, the control panel, is it coordinates the pulsing between the heaters. So it's orchestrating the system as a system, and it's deploying energy to where it's needed, and it's as far as possible trying to get the on pulsing of one panel to occur when another panel is pulsed off, and therefore keep the overall load down. One of the outcomes of this approach is that we have a flat energy demand through the 24-hour period. There is no classic morning or evening spike when you wake up and switch your heating on, or come home from work and switch your heating on, which is present in virtually all conventional systems. One of the biggest uses for you or your resident as a like a user of the system is that it works really well with solar and battery, which really hate big spikes in demand. So this is part of the future proofing of this product. It works really well with other aspects that are coming down the track towards you, which is more use of solar in particular and battery. About infrared, I think I've covered this. It's 100% safe. It's totally natural. It's what the sun is doing to you without the ultraviolet. The feeling of warmth is different from conventional heating, and it is truly comfortable. We've got a lot of elderly residents, and they absolutely love it. For the same reason they enjoy being in the Mediterranean, that people say, oh, I feel so much better. It's because they're being warmed in that way, and it warms their body, warms their joints. Infrared is widely used in the NHS and baby incubators and all sorts of things. So it is inherently a very safe and natural form of heating.
I've got a bit of a curveball question on that note, actually, Oliver. And I'll take this point to say that the breadth of questions I'm getting is honestly amazing. I understand maybe 1 in 3 of these, but John said, is this the same infrared they use to kill cancer?
No, I'll answer that one. It's no, infrared doesn't kill cancer. I think he's thinking of radiation therapy for cancer,
Okay.
which is X-rays or gamma rays or protons, which is a different kind of thing altogether. So it'd be good if it would, because it'd be a brilliant win-win for everybody. But no, X-ray is just infrared is just heating, and it heats you through, and it's a very, very healthy heat. So
okay, fine. Thank you.
Good question. Good question.
Okay, so proven performance. So we've got 1,000 systems out in the field so far, covering all sorts of house types, some of which are represented here, from traditional sort of very social housing kind of stuff on the left there. So 200 systems up in the Hebrides, to modular housing, the Halton housing there, those are actually modular buildings, to traditional builds in the middle there, to what we might call accommodation blocks, where we're with Merthyr, 31 systems there, to full-blown sort of more like tower blocks on the right-hand side. Data on which our performance is based has been thoroughly independently reviewed, looking at 100 house years of data across real houses. And it's this data that gives us an average performance ratio of 2.69. Just to remind you again, that is entirely comparable with the SCOP of heat pumps of 3. So we're nipping right on the heels of a heat pump there. The report, we're happy to share this report with anyone on this call, by the way, please just contact us afterwards. But you'll see in this report that terraced houses and flats score above this average. In this report, 91% of the houses achieve an energy performance above standard electric heaters. And in 45% of the cases, we actually outperformed a heat pump. That will be in smaller buildings and flats. But we're also working with Waits. We're an official innovation partner. You can find us on the Waits Innovation Portal. Waits, obviously a huge construction business, and has made it their business to help promote low carbon technologies such as ourselves. So they've crawled all over us and are out there trying to give people such as yourselves sort of market leading sustainable technologies which they can trust. It's not all about numbers and energy saving. There are some other benefits I'd like to run through. So from your point of view as landlords, no outside pump unit, no water-based delivery system, no complex switching. All the controls that this system requires are built within the panels or that control panel. No maintenance, full warranties. We give a 10+10 warranty, and we have full online technical support. The product is future-proof in the sense that it works extremely well with all the other innovations that are coming down the track towards you as we go into this low-carbon electric heating future. And you can't avoid it. It is coming down the track towards you. And by future-proof, I mean this. These characteristics you expect. So what I'm saying to you really is, if you install our system, even if you don't use all this stuff straight away, it will take you on a journey over the next 15 to 20 years where all the extra features you will probably be using will be completely compatible with our system. The first thing is it gives full data down to individual panels, kilowatt hours used, target temperature, actual temperature. Secondly, as I've already said, this is perfect for battery and solar because it has this flat demand. And for the same reason, because it has no spikes in energy demand, it works extremely well with time of use tariffs and can save customers, residents up to 25% versus standard tariffs just by using an appropriate time of use tariff. Happy to talk about that more. Customers, they love it. All day comfort, perfect for young families, elderly and working from home, which of course is an increasing feature these days. Improved air quality, because it's not hot air being circulated, it reduces the circulating dust. And infrared not being, because of the way it works and the fact that it's not heating the air in a traditional way, it reduces moisture in the air. And because it's keeping the fabric of the house warm, it's reducing damp and mold. In a conventional, traditional system, you are heating through hot air. So you're heating the air, hot air obviously accumulates moisture. It then hits a cold wall, you get running damp and condensation. Infrared completely avoids all that because the wall's warm and the air is less moist. Customers like it because it's easy to use, lots of control features like temperature timer and zones. And they've got operational data. If they want to see how much they're spending, they can see that very easily on the panel. So we have some very nice customer feedback where people say really it's revolutionized their lives. And what we know, whereas they used to be struggling, say on a storage heater or something like that, they've now got all day comfort and feeling, you know, from comfort throughout the house all day and feeling much better for it. I want to take you through, I hope this is not too ambitious, this bit, Ambion in practice, by which I mean a little case study around a 2-bed flat in this tower block, upgrading your estate. All 47 flats in this block are actually on our system, but we're going to particularly look at a top floor flat. This block was built in 1956, and our customer is Fife Council. So there's a floor plan of flats, and these little square things here are the placing of our heaters. This flat has looking on the left-hand side, floor area of just under 60 meters squared, and it has an annual heat demand. Now, this is the figure that you can find in your EPC reports, which tell you how many kilowatt hours is required each year to heat that flat. And in this flat, it is 9,500 kilowatt hours, which is 162 kilowatt hours per meter squared, which is a really whopping number. These days, you would tend to, and I can point you to reports that explain this to you, but you tend to look for about 90 kilowatt hours per meter squared as being a sort of reasonable outcome for a building like this. So this is a really thermally inefficient building, lots of heat loss through those walls. Specifying our product into that flat comes at £4,500, 2-bedroom flat. And together with a slightly quite an upmarket water product, we get to 7,400. So a combined price of 7,400, and that compares with £15,000 for a heat pump. These are BEIS prices here. BEIS being the Government Department of Business, Energy, Industrial Strategy. They've done a lot of pumping out information to help people in the market. So that's a BEIS listed price for a heat pump. If you look at how it compares with to the left there, a straightforward panel heater would be about 4,300 with water in this flat, and storage heaters would be about £7,000. This is at BEIS prices. So we come in at around about a storage heater. That's including a posh water product for us, as against conventional water product for both panel heaters and storage heaters. So we're pretty cost effective, half the price of a heat pump. If you look at the energy bills for the residents in that house, given that space heat demand that I've just referred to, we come in about £1,000. That's at these current energy prices that I've talked about in the price cap. If you look at a panel heater, that would be 3 to the left. You'll see it's 3,658. Reduces a bit for a storage heater because you've got economy 7. So we come out roughly the same as a heat pump, and 71% cheaper to run than your panel heater.
So just to clarify there, Oliver,
yeah,
£1,000, £1,061
yeah,
is the annual fuel bill for a 2-bed flat with ambient heating.
At current high energy prices.
And that's right now the cost, the eye-watering cost that people are paying right now.
Yes, or if they leave their heating on. So
Which
what a lot of people do,
yeah,
is just not putting their heating on, which is obviously going to create huge problems. But if they put their heating on in a flat like that, that's what they're going to be spending. If you put a heat pump in there at £15,000, you would get to about 1,200. But your cheap and cheerful products, the panel heaters that you might have stuck in there in the old days, that would be costing £3,600. But apart from all that, of course, then the carbon footprint of this building with a conventional system would be 2.3 tons per annum. It's 0.7 for us, and just a little bit more for a heat pump. Payback. What I mean by that is like cost benefit. How much does this product cost divided by how much energy is it saving each year compared to a conventional system? So how much does it cost? How much payback you're getting compared to a do-nothing option if you just leave a panel heater in there, let your residents spend nearly £4,000 a year on the heating system. What's the saving they're making by moving to Ambion? And how does that compare with the upfront cost? So a 2.9-year payback is pretty impressive when it would take 9 years for a heat pump to pay itself back. That's because it's saving roughly the same amount of energy, but is, twice the price. So our product is good for combating fuel poverty, is good for combating carbon footprint, but also makes financial sense. It's giving you the best bang for your buck in terms of the amount you're prepared to spend as a landlord to provide a benefit to your resident, with a payback way below a heat pump. Now, as landlords, I know, you're a little bit different from, say, social housing that feel a very strong duty of care to your tenants. You might be a little bit more sort of hard-nosed about it. But I think it's difficult, depends what bit of the rental market you're in. But I think in many bits of the rental market, being able to show your tenants or prospective tenants that you have a heating system whereby they can keep themselves warm without costing the earth themselves is important. And if you're in the sort of reasonably, slightly more sort of upmarket part of the market, a lot of experience we've had shows that, millennials and those kind of people are not just worried about their pocket, but they're also asking questions about the carbon footprint of the heating, or of the flat that they're moving into, and respond well to landlords who can demonstrate they're giving them a product which is both good for their pocket and allows them to actually be warm affordably, but also is doing its bit to save the planet. So this is a representation of what's going on. This is real results for that flat. That is, the black line is the predicted usage for the flat using conventional technology. That's all within SAP. SAP is the software that produces EPC reports, so it is the system that everyone uses. And that is the actual usage using our system over 2 years. So whereas this flat should be using 9,500 kilowatt hours, we're actually using 1,200 whilst keeping ourselves totally warm the whole time. So it is a very powerful product. Just then, I want to introduce the idea of fabric, because fabric's becoming more and more something that landlords are thinking about, particularly social landlords, but I think all landlords about, because very often to achieve the EPC rating that you need to achieve, fabric probably sits somewhere within the solution. It's very difficult to get purely a heating system or a water system that is going to make a big jump from, say, EPC E or G up to C. It's going to be very difficult to achieve that journey without some fabric intervention. But then what I'm trying to demonstrate here is how it's a basket of interventions. You've got fabric and low carbon heating systems such as ourselves, and indeed a good water system, which taken together can get you to where you need to be. So in this is modeling this very same flat, but in this particular first example, just to compare and contrast, we're getting the no fabric upgrade at all. So that is the heat demand, 10,760 according to SAP. And that is the figure you've seen for 3,658 is what it would cost to heat that if you did nothing on an electric system. If you put our system in, because we've got in this instance a 3.5 performance ratio, you're immediately going to reduce the actual energy used to 3,900 kilowatts and the bills reduced down to 1,342. If you put in a kind of state-of-the-art water system, this is an indoor heat pump with a performance ratio of 3.1, you're going to chip away at the water bit of this, which is always the smaller part, but your kilowatt hours will reduce from 1,223 to 395, and the running cost there from 416 to 134. So in total, you've reduced the energy bills to £1,000, 1,061, down from the 3,600 that it would have been before. That's what we saw on the previous sheet. And if this flat was on gas at current prices, it would be costing 1,060. So by using, although gas is, a third the cost of energy, because here you've got some super efficient systems that are driving down the amount of kilowatt hours used, you've returned your resident, your tenant, to a running cost that is comparable to if they'd been on gas, which is currently the cheapest form of heating. And of course, you've massively reduced the carbon footprint. But how much this, okay, now I'm going to look at including fabric, and then we're going to look at how much it costs. If you put fabric in, you would expect to reduce the kilowatt hours heating requirement in this flat down from where it was before, which is 162 kilowatt hours per meter squared, down to 90. And I can give you documentary evidence as to why that's quite often taken as the kind of sweet spot that people aim for. At a stroke, therefore, although fabric's obviously expensive and cumbersome to actually achieve, but in so doing, you have already reduced the heat demand from 10,760 to 6,500, and you've reduced the running costs down from 3,600 down to 2,214. So you are one step forward in this journey. If you then install the ambient heating system with a 3.5 times performance ratio, you are reducing kilowatt hours down to 2,700 and the bills down to 930. So you're getting useful. Plus the water system we talked about before, you're now taking the total bill down to 648 as compared with the 3,600 that we started out on. Now that is well below now, actually, the cost of running this flat on a gas system. And you've reduced the carbon footprint down to 0.4 of a ton. So this is working extremely well, and this really is setting this flat up to be, very energy efficient going forward. Look at the cost of all this.
Can you pop back for a second there, Oliver?
Yeah,
a couple of questions coming in. Just to clarify, fabric upgrade in this context, we're talking about upgrading the insulation in the property, right?
Yes, sorry, I'm sure I made that clear. Yes, the insulation could be wall insulation, it could be ceiling insulation, it could be double glazing, it could be new doors, more thermally efficient doors, and a whole host of other measures. And what you'll find yourself doing is really selecting from a menu of measures and trying to, got so much to spend to do this, and you're trying to get to some sort of thermal efficiency of the building. As I say, probably to get it to 90 kilowatt hours per meters square would be the typical sort of tipping point in all this. Okay. So if you look at the payback analysis, so if you look at the Ambion system, it costs £4,500. It saves your residents 2,300. That's a 2 times payback in the no fabric scenario. And taken together, this is costing £8,000, and you have got a 3.1 year payback. So that is very compelling when you think of the heat pump example. We looked at right at the start, where you've got like 9 or 10 years, and even that's low. Flats are probably slightly better. I've seen plenty of other examples where the payback is sort of 10 to 15 years for a heat pump. So you're getting good bang for your buck. If you go for fabric upgrade, we've assumed your fabric upgrade is going to cost £220 per square foot. That's a guesstimate based on similar situations we've been involved with. The fabric would have a 9-year payback. In other words, if it costs £12,500 to put in, it saves your resident £1,400 per year. That's a 9-year payback, which is actually, again, quite short. I think flats are probably better.
If you only do the insulation.
That's the contribution in this of the whole scheme that is provided by the fabric upgrade. Yeah.
Okay.
In addition, then along comes Ambion. The payback actually for Ambion's going up a little bit to 3.6, and that's simply because we've got less energy to save for you, because you reduce the energy requirement through your fabric upgrade. The water does its bit, and therefore you've got a total package here of £21,000 to totally upgrade this particular flat and get it to a really high level of thermal efficiency. You've got a total 7-year payback. If you can get funding, and we have an example just recently where we got eco funding for the fabric, depends on what tenant you've got, you can reduce the payback to 2.7 years. So that is a totally revamped flat or house where you've had to spend about £8,000 in total. And within 2.7 years, so it's only cost 2.7 years of energy saving to actually achieve that. In the world of EPC, as I said before, it's quite likely with any really low performing property, if you're already down in the E's and the sort of EFG area, the F and G area anyway, where you're going to require more than heating systems to get you over the line. You are going to require some element of fabric, and you might also think about solar. A lot of people think about solar and putting a couple of panels on the roof. They're reasonably cost effective. They do very well in SAP, and working with our system anyway would do a lot to reduce the running costs in the house. And we can model that too, but I haven't done it for today, just to keep it sort of simple in inverted commas. So I hope that's given you a flavor. We specialize in smaller and multi-occupancy buildings. We get super high performance in those kind of buildings. We're a really cost-effective solution. Heat pumps are really poor in those areas. So if you are making this journey, if you are a landlord that's thinking about either ditching your conventional heating systems because they're kind of old and knackered and really expensive for your tenants to run, you're beginning to get complaints, or worrying about fuel poverty in your homes, then if you want a low carbon efficient solution and you don't want to go to the cost of a heat pump, then we are a really compelling option, and we'd love to discuss your project with you. Equally, if for whatever reason you are ditching gas, and we have got a landlord in London, the Benyon Estates, who have made exactly that decision. They're all on gas. They're going to ditch them all over time. They're going to do it as the voids come up and as the refurbs happen. They're going to 1 by 1, 2 by 2 switch to electric. They need it to be a future-proof, low-carbon and cost-effective system, and that's why they've chosen us. So I'll leave it there. Very happy to take questions. Thank you very much for listening.
Lovely, thank you, Oliver. I'm glad you said you're happy to take questions, because I've got an absolute shed load of them, and two more of just popped.
Should I come off screen share or what?
Oh, what have you got on the next slide? You got contact information or anything?
Oh yes, I have. Sorry, yeah, I've got contact.
So let's keep that up for now, and we'll do a few questions. Then we'll pop back to to talking to one another normally. So very first question of the night, and it's actually one of the things that I wrote down as you were starting as well. And this is all about EPC, because I suspect that a lot of the landlords here tonight will be here off the back of all the news of EPC, and Warren painted a very deplorable picture of the world as it stands today for private landlords with changes to EPC rating. So as I understand it, EPC ratings are still based off how much it costs rather than carbonisation. So I'm going to read out Rodney's comment, because I think he's encapsulated this really well. The changes to MEES and the EPC rules have not been confirmed. The government are leaving landlords to work on the basis that the assumptions in consultation are confirmed. iHouse Landlord Association have been asking the government to publish the new requirements, as switching to electric currently can reduce your EPC rating, since it's based on costs with gas being cheaper. So effectively, although this is better for the environment and it's better for saving you money or saving your tenants money, is there a chance that this is actually going to dial back your EPC rating? And let's say you're a D right now, it might bring you down to an E, simply because electric is more expensive than gas.
Well, look, that is definitely a real challenge. It is quite true that there's a complete kind of contradiction within government policy, and the EPC, whilst the sort of annual heat demand calculations are kind of accurate and sound, the actual sort of scoring given is still driven to a large extent by the cost of running the system. That will change at some stage, but that is absolutely as it sits right now. So it can therefore still be a legitimate short-term choice to either remain with gas, or you even, to be blunt, you even get some people who, even if they got to replace the boiler, have to replace the heating system, actually replace it with gas in the short term. The problem with that is that we're getting to a point now where within the life cycle of that system, you may well find that you're going to have to change the boiler earlier than you would want, because boiler systems will become outlawed. And the EPC rules are surely at some stage in the reasonably near future going to come in line, if you like, with the low carbon objectives of government policy, which are becoming stronger and stronger the whole time, and begin to tilt it away from gas. But I think the real lesson that's coming out of sort of real world experiences at the moment is this: if you are having to introduce fabric to achieve the EPC score that you need, and a lot of people are, I think a lot of people hoped that a quick change of kit might do it, but realizing it's a lot more complicated than that. Then I think two things. One is with a good fabric upgrade, you will easily get a C, and you'll easily be able to achieve a C with an electric product, even if it's not an air source heat pump. And particularly if you introduce some solar, then you're going to be right up at a B. So it depends what you want to do, but you'll certainly get to a C with a fabric upgrade. So we would encourage people to think that if they're doing a proper overhaul of their property, then think very seriously about moving to an electric low carbon heating system as part of that, and achieving a C in the first instance, but that will probably go up and up as EPC begins to reflect or sort of come in line with government policy elsewhere, and particularly if in due course you start adding solar panels. So we think by doing that, you've really kind of future-proofed the property. If you put a gas boiler back in, you could you could find the refit you're doing has suddenly it suddenly needs changing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of an unfair question to ask you, to be honest, because it's the EPC ratings that are the problem, and it just doesn't make any sense. But that's the reality of it. Is there a way to perhaps at the minute model, okay, this is what my property looks like right now, this is what it would look like with ambient heating, and kind of find out what the EPC rating would change to before making that commitment of buying the lot, ripping everything out and installing it?
Yeah, and it's something we do the whole time. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, brilliant. We can't do it ourselves because we're not EPC assessors, but we would work with an EPC consultant, and we can model it. And this is often what we do. So I think this is not it's not a silver bullet type presentation. It's a bit more complicated than that in a way. It's about saying that there are a basket of measures out there on the EPC journey, the low carbon journey, and you need to think about the cost effectiveness. You need to achieve the overall EPC result you want. And you need to think of the cost effectiveness of and the ease of delivery of the basket of measures you're thinking about to come to an optimum solution.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. How's about an easy one now then? How can you tell the difference between an electric conventional, they've all disappeared, but I can half remember the question, an electric conventional radiator versus an infrared panel? I mean, visually, yeah.
Well, there's one right behind Oliver. That's an infrared panel.
So it looks like a whiteboard.
It looks exactly like a whiteboard. And a lot of office blocks that we put them into, they actually do use them as whiteboards as well. So they've got a dual purpose. It's a glass panel. It's tempered. It looks very different from from a normal electric heater.
This is a bit different from the one in the presentation, because in our latest, this is a slightly older one. They're now all white, including the metal. So there's no shiny metal. They're just a white, sleek white product. Sits, close to the wall.
I imagine if in doubt as well, there are no pipes going in and out of that because it doesn't need to heat water up.
No.
Correct.
So that's the second thing.
Yeah.
There's a simple fuse spur just off, I don't know if you see it, but just off to the right. So yeah, very simple and neat.
And just to piggyback off on that question, we've got a question come through from Paul Hilliard saying, can you disguise or hide the panels? Like either by installing a stud wall or something?
Yes, you can. We're not a stud wall. Something we quite commonly do is put a picture on top of the panel. So we can supply a picture frame with an appropriate clip. And if you give us the picture, customer gives us an image of the picture they want, then we will have that picture produced. So we can sell them a sort of clip-on cover, at which point it totally disappears, just becomes a picture on the wall. And in traditional environments, once or twice, we've actually put, this is slightly odd, an old-fashioned radiator cover, the kind of thing you might find in your granny's house, sort of crisscross material, that kind of thing. Just
going back in time.
Yeah, stick one of those in front of it. So, a state-of-the-art product looks like a traditional, heater.
Does that affect the efficacy at all? Because you're then
very slightly, very slightly.
Capacity. And similarly,
yeah, well, it penetrates. It penetrates. So that's not the problem. What you need to make, the only thing you need to make sure is that the sensor, the temperature sensor right on the edge here, is not contained within a box, because otherwise it will think it's warmer than it really is. So it's about flow around the box, really.
Okay, so it's interesting that you say that. So it's similar to these smart TRVs that you're getting on traditional radiators these days. The trouble that they've got is that they're supposed to predict what the heat is in the room, maybe 2 or 3 feet away, but they're awful at it. They just sense the radiators right next to them and say, right, turn the radiator off, it's getting bleeding hot in here. So how efficient is yours? I imagine it's trying to do the same thing.
I'm not sure I totally answer, but what it's doing is the temperature sensor is built in here, so it knows exactly what the air temperature is in the vicinity of the panel. And as I say, the PCB, which is, or microprocessor, which is just as it happens next to the sensor, is monitoring that temperature. When it feels the temperature is not keeping close to target temperature, to within 0.1 degree of target temperature, it's deploying more rapid pulsing systems to get back onto target. And
is it estimating what the temperature is 3 feet away?
No, it's reading the temperature right next to it.
So is that going to affect?
Well, one of the features of, so this is one of the differences. One of the features of infrared, and particularly the way we do it, where the whole room is becoming saturated with infrared, all the wall materials, and radiating temperature, therefore, is that there's complete consistency of air temperature from left to right, top to bottom. Whereas conventional convective heating circulates around the room. So it's warmer on the outside of the room than it is in the middle, and it's warmer at the top than it is at the bottom. And therefore, the placing of a thermostat can be quite critical. Here, it's constant through the room. Again, if you just think to the kind of analogy I was using of being in a house after a hot summer's day, and the fact that you are very warm at that point, and that's because the walls are emitting infrared energy. You don't get any cold spots in that environment. The whole thing is warm from top to bottom.
Okay, I'm with you. Kate's asked, I've had quotes for 2 very different infrared heating systems, and I think you're going to know where this is going. One using the panel system described here, and one using a matting laid above the ceiling. I understand that the effectiveness of the system relies on there being few obstacles between the heat source and the people/items being warmed. What are the advantages or disadvantages of these 2 systems?
Yeah, okay, right. Well, first off, I'm going to push back a little bit on the matting, the system where you have an infrared element actually under the plaster in a wall or a ceiling is something we understand. The one that she's saying is like ours will be a panel-based system where the panels are going either on the wall or on the ceiling. But I'm going to push back and mark myself down for not having done my job properly if I haven't differentiated between what we do and what the panel, I suspect your questioner, is talking about. Just because it's a panel and the other one they're talking about is a panel, it's not doing the same thing. Most infrared panels are simply placed on a thermostat and they work. The control system is a conventional thermostat system, whereas we don't have a thermostat. We use the control system and the pulsing system that I've talked about. That's a totally different beast in the control area. And therefore, you will get you will not get the energy efficiency with a thermostat system as you get with our pulse system. I'm not sure there's a whole lot of knowledge and data about how infrared embedded within the plaster or in a film that goes under the plaster, I simply couldn't tell you what the performance characteristics are for that sort of system, and whether it's more or less efficient than an infrared panel on a thermostat. I know that we are a lot more efficient than an infrared panel on a thermostat, and we've done lots of side-by-side tests, and we're 30 to 40% more efficient than an infrared on a bog standard thermostat. But so away from energy use, I think the things to think about are, between those two things, is that if you embed your infrared within like the plaster of the walls, in the walls, the issues that I'd worry about are, it's a very complex install, supposing you're not replastering the room that we're talking about. So, you know, and secondly, what happens if something goes wrong? You simply cannot remove, as we could, remove the panel, replace it with a new one. You would have a product that's sort of embedded within the building fabric. So I think that's quite complicated. And I've got nothing to think that a film that's embedded in a ceiling or a wall outperforms what we've got here. I've not seen any infrared, however installed, outperform our system.
Have you heard anything of the matting being better at retaining the heat than the panels that you've got? Because we've got a question here saying that the asker has heard this.
I cannot think why, because the way our systems work is I'm seldom warmed directly by that panel. I'm warmed by the fabric of this room. So correctly placed wall panels, correctly specified like ours, will warm the fabric of the room if you let them. If you keep switch them on and off in terms of occupancy, then you'll never get the room warm. But if you leave it as our system works, where it's kind of goes through initial always on phase to warm the fabric of the room and then starts pulsing, then there is no question, no doubt at all, that the fabric in the room is totally warmed and is cooperating with that pulsing routine to create constant thermal comfort. We've no doubt about that at all, from all of the data we've got and all the customer feedback we've got. So no,
is the pulsing a specific?
It's unique to us.
Yeah. Okay. So the pulsings are kind of your USP there in that regard.
It is. Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Sorry, well, I've not done my job, but there you go.
So you know what is. I've probably not understood it because I've already asked about 14 questions about it. We've got a question from Deborah here with a reference to someone that I've never heard of before. So here's hoping it's not a serial killer. Is it an independent system, or is there a central kill switch where the Gavin Newsom wannabe of this world can remotely control the system, as happened in California this summer? Who can control it?
Again, I'm with you. I'm not quite sure what that question is referring to, but the customer has full control of the system. What we can do is we do get the data, and that allows our technical support to provide sort of online advice to the customer if there are kind of any operating issues with it. And it does mean, if you're perhaps a larger landlord who wants to receive data, a lot of social housing do this routinely, they want to know how their estate is performing, whether their residents are in thermal, thermal comfort and the like. Then within the confines of GDPR, we can provide kind of macro data and show them how the estate is performing. But
so they can see specifically how much they're saving, effectively.
Yes.
Well, their kilowatt usage is, at least, versus
well, the saving would be, if you go think back to that graph I showed you, the saving is the difference between the black line of what SAP says you should be using and the green line, so what you are actually using, then is the saving. That you can see that.
Okay, I understand that. So there's no black box under your desk that says turn off all ambient heaters.
No.
We've confirmed that, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, the government can turn it off because it's electric, right? They'll just turn off the electric. So we're never safe from that, I'm afraid. That's the one about infrared curing cancer. Can tenants interfere with the settings? This was brought up at the point where you mentioned your central control iPad looking thing. So presumably there's one of those in every property.
Yeah. Yeah, and classically, we would, on original install, we would, depending what you wanted to do, what your landlords wanted to do, but certainly in social housing, they would want you to talk to the customer, the resident, and say, hey, how do you want this set up? What's the temperature you want in your bedroom? What's the temperature you want in your living rooms? Do you want it to be a bit cooler at night and that kind of thing? And then we'd set it up and leave it. What the behavioral change is, we don't then want people mucking around with it, we want them to leave it alone. Because that's the way they will maximize energy use and cost saving. Landlords are different. So it depends on the setup. Some landlords, we can lock the screen. So you have a code where only authorized people can access the screen. We can give your resident a very simple screen where they have control over temperature, but really we want them to leave it alone. We have some social housing where the situation is kind of so difficult that actually the control panels are locked in the cupboard.
I don't think that's legal. Okay. Well, never mind.
I said the control panel, not the resident.
No. Well, yeah. Either way. I suppose because it's software, you can change kind of what accessibility is. But I think there's a big education piece here, right? Because the law, as I understand it, is that tenants must have access to control their heating systems, hence why you can't lock it in a box. But in this case, you're saying, well, it's there, but leave it alone. And I think a lot of people I saw you had 24 hours, keep it on 24 hours. Well, during the night, I'm thinking, is that an efficient way to do it? And during the summer, do you keep the thing on all summer?
Well, yeah, yes, that's a real yes and no answer to that question. Yes, you do. You don't need to go to control panel and say it's summer. But if you set a target temperature of 19 degrees, the minute that outside, the ambient temperature gets more than 90 degrees, it'll just stop pulsing. I mean, it's automatic in that sense.
So the system's smart enough to turn itself off.
Absolutely. It only pulses. It's constantly working out how much it needs to pulse to achieve target temperature. As ambient temperatures increase, it pulses less and less and less. Hence, in that graph you saw, those green bars got smaller and smaller and smaller as we approach summer. And during summer, we're almost totally off. There's always a bit of a cold day somewhere in summer, so it comes on a tiny bit, but essentially it's off, yeah.
Okay. Mark's asked, what's the life expectancy of this system?
Over 20 years. And we guarantee, basic guarantee of 10 and a further top-up guarantee of 10. So you can get 20 years warranty cover.
Okay, but is that parts and labor or is that parts only?
That is for the panels themselves, that's parts and labor.
And just to piggyback off of that question, we had a question come through on Facebook from Darren saying, what happens if the integrated microprocessor fails? Can they be replaced independently?
Yes, they can. That's a good question. Occasionally that does happen. Yeah, the great thing about the system is, although it works as a system, you can remove one panel and the rest of the system would simply carry on working. In fact, try and compensate for the loss of that panel. Your actually energy efficiency would go down a little bit because you're slightly below specification. So, but what we would do is we'd turn up and replace the panel if that had happened. Then the system would carry on as before. So it's very easy to do that.
How would the landlord be able to diagnose that something like that had happened, or the tenant?
We can see on our system if the panel is malfunctioning.
Okay.
So a tenant might call and say, the panel in the bedroom is not getting warm. The bedroom's cold. That's the first thing we would look for. Or we'd come up an exception report, our technical support, and we'd see that there's a fault and we'd contact the tenant.
I've got a question here from Hugh, who made fun of my lamp last week, so you can feel free to ignore this one. I don't understand it, so I've got no follow-up, prepared for no follow-up questions here. Is it near or far infrared?
It's far infrared.
What does that mean?
It's where it sits on the electromagnetic spectrum. And infrared sits in a certain place in that spectrum. And then even with infrared, you get a range of infrareds from near infrared and far infrared, and we're far infrared. The near infrared systems are the kind of infrared systems you get in pub gardens, where you get those bars that glow. and heats
Yeah.
you. Well, that is a form of infrared. Actually, maybe I should have said that in terms of people just understanding broadly what infrared is doing, because there you can straight away you can see you're in a cold pub garden. No one's trying to warm everything. They're not trying to warm the air, because that would be impossible. But if you're in line of sight of those orange bars, you are feeling warm. So we're slightly further up the spectrum in the way that we do it. That's why there's no red panel here. It's just a infrared film within the glass panel, but it is working in a similar way, heating you without warming the air straight away.
Okay, I'm comfortable enough within myself, Oliver, to tell you that I did not understand a word of that. But let's move on. I've got about 25 more questions, and we can't spend all day trying to educate me. So James has asked, is the air heated by the objects releasing the heat that they have stored?
Yes. So whilst what I've said is strictly true, that it's not warming the air, hence the analogy of being outside on a cold day and cold air, but if you get into a beam of sunlight, you can feel warm. All that is true. And therefore, there are actually two different concepts. One is, if you like, air temperature, and the other is mean radiant temperature. But suffice to say, internally, it all becomes the same thing. If you've got an enclosed space like a room, and you warm not the air, but the fabric, because the air is going nowhere, it's not long before the air temperature equalizes to the fabric temperature, and it all becomes something that is warmed, both fabric and air, to a certain temperature, which is why our system, although it's not heating the air directly, we still can actually control the system by measuring the air temperature.
Okay. I've got a couple of questions here, which are, I'm going to lump them together, which is effectively, please send the report. So Warren, if we've got a meeting tomorrow, if you could send that over to me, I'll stick that on our Facebook group, a link for that. Within that report, do you have information or examples of where the solution's been configured into things like commercial buildings or HMOs, or because we showed the flat there, is it kind of full of that kind of example?
Not quite that way, because actually it's a data set of 100 house years, and then it's crunching through the data set and coming up with the answers. But we can provide some case studies around certain building types that we've done.
Yeah, I think a few further examples would be really good.
Okay.
If installing this form of heating, and I'm going to ask Warren to answer this one because I've already prepped him on the answer here. If installing this form of heating, what system is needed alongside it to provide hot water?
Well, we'd use a KERS system historically, but any hot water system would do, or an Economy 7 or something like that. We'd recommend that you go to your partner, though, Wolsey or somewhere like that, and speak to them in the first instance and see if they've got anything that's a heat recovery hot water system or something like that. Was that good enough?
That was really good. And you know what? I'm going to text the sniper that's trained on your position and say, hang fire. He's done a great job there.
Tell Johnny I've big thumbs up.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, and I was about to say, because we're past 8 o'clock now, so I think we'll do a couple more questions. What I will do, and I'm sorry in advance, Warren, is I'll put your email address in the chat. So if if members have any additional questions, are they okay to email you? Yeah,
tell them please do, and I'll work through as many as I can tonight, and then finish the rest off tomorrow. But I'm picking up on some now and sending the fictional reports and things like that as the sort of webinars going on. So hopefully I'm getting through a few. But yeah,
okay,
please do.
All right, so I've just put the email address in the chat. So I will, like I said, we'll take a couple more questions, but then if there's any more questions or any questions that we may have missed, if you could just email Warren.
I'll go through. Will I be able to see this as well? I'll go through them as well and try and answer as many as we can.
Yeah, we can send the full chat worth of questions over. I've just scrolled down to try and see how many there are, and I'm still going. So it's going to be a long night for you, I'm afraid, mate. A couple of questions. I'll try and do the more common ones now, and then we've got some specifics here. Paul's really laid it on you here with some of these. I don't understand half the questions here, let alone the answers. So feel free to answer those later this evening. In terms of aesthetics, you mentioned we can hang a picture over it. Is there anything else we can do? Can they be painted?
No, not painted.
Okay.
I'm not saying it'd be tragic if you do, but we've not tested enough painting to feel comfortable to recommend it.
So do they only come kind of factory coloured white?
White. Any choice you like, as long as it's white.
And the frame, I noticed you've got a silver frame there, but the others
Yeah.
are white sometimes as well.
Yeah. So we changed to white. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So it's a tempered glass panel.
Yes.
I'm saying, yeah. Is that fragile at all? If someone pushes a sofa up against it, is it likely to crack?
Not at all. We very occasionally get a crack. If it does crack, it cracks like a car windscreen. So it doesn't just, they get shards of glass falling out into the carpet. It just is all retained within the frame. But very, very occasionally, it is an extremely tough product that's earned its spurs in the social housing market. So nothing gets a harder use than in social housing, I'd say. So it's a tough product.
Okay, and I will leave you with, I think, one final question. There was a brilliant one here somewhere. I think I've lost it now in my scrolling.
While Ant looks for that, I'll take a moment to ask a quick question. How long does the installation process take?
That was it. That was it.
Warren, do you want to do that one?
It's very quick. It's very quick indeed. Yeah. It's basically, as long as there's an electric point, it's putting a panel on the wall, so we can do it within, if everything's in place and it's a decent size house and everything's set up, a day on an average size house, because it is literally just putting electric panels on walls.
That's a day to do several panels, not just the one.
If it's as long as there's electric to the point where the panel needs to be, that's the key point. Then it's just a case of mounting the panel on a wall in a historic way of putting a normal heating panel on, and then commissioning, which takes probably an hour.
Okay.
What Warren's talking about there is if you've already got an electric system, if you're moving from a panel or to a storage heater, then it's super easy. If you're moving from gas, it is a bit more complicated, but I'm not least, you'll rip out your gas system and all the wet system goes with it. So, people who are moving from gas tend to be doing it as part of an overhaul of the whole building anyway. In which case, if you're doing an overhaul, it's super easy. You just get an electrician to put in a few more wires. It couldn't be simpler.
In terms of installation, then, is it something that a typical electrician could do from start to finish, or would you guys need to come out and install the panels yourselves?
Basically, electrician could do. We would, if they're new to it, if they haven't already been trained by us, we would train them. But when I say train, that's a fancy word for just a few do's and don'ts and understanding how to, mount the thing on the wall and various other bits. It's unlike heat pumps where you need a whole separate skill set. This is something a trained electrician can do with a little bit of training from us.
Okay, brilliant. Look, I think that's probably the end of the questions for now, but I expect that we've got at least double that to come. There's a couple here about kind of legality of tenants' control of the heating as well. So between ourselves and you guys, I think we can get the majority of these answered pretty quickly. But thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know it's been quite a long one. For me, it has, at least. Sometimes I delude myself into thinking I'm quite a clever guy, and someone like you comes along, Oliver, and I can't keep up, I'm afraid. This has been fascinating.
Good. Well, I'm not sure what to make of that, but I hope it's been useful.
It's been very useful, and not to forget, I'm just going to put Warren on the spot a little bit here. The prices that were shown earlier on in terms of payback, this is all pre-negotiation. I still need to drag Warren over the coals tomorrow, and we're looking at getting maybe a quarter of that. So look, it's been fantastic having you guys on. We've got HSS on next week. HSS, remember those? They're coming back. So HSS Hire are re-partnering with LMPG. We'll be speaking to those guys next week about what went wrong last time, what's going to go right this time, and why we're bringing them back, the range, etc., etc., etc. I'm actually not going to be on it because I'm going to be in Sheffield doing a presentation for LMPG. So if you're in Sheffield, then come along to that and just watch this on your phone at the same time. I don't mind. So Bhavesh, that'll be yourself and Tracy, right, next week?
Yeah, I guess I finally get to take charge. Yeah, unfortunately, Nick won't be available as well. So it'll be myself and Tracy.
You could sound a little bit more enthusiastic.
Yes.
You've got a week to worry about it.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for coming along tonight, guys. As I said, it's been the most popular one so far, and with very good reason. And I look forward to seeing you all in 2 weeks' time. Look out for them next week, Bath.
We'll do 100%. But before we go, just one quick last question. How do members request quotes and installation? What would be the best method to do that?
Could I answer that? Could we put that in abeyance until you and I and Anthony have spoke tomorrow and we work out a plan?
Yep. I'm very glad that you said that, Warren.
To the members.
Certainly, yeah. But like I said, guys, the email address is there for Warren if you have any specifics. We'll try to get through as many questions as we can this evening.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks so much, guys.
Good. Thanks both, and thanks everyone for listening. Great.
Yeah.
See you soon. Cheers.